Hi there, Fiona Pearman and Kate Borah, and we're continuing our conversation about building relationships, why they matter, and how to go about it. And this week, we're really talking about what you as an individual, how you can build the relationships that are necessary for the career progression you'd like to achieve. And there is a piece about including thinking about networking. How do I engage with more people? How do I start those conversations that would be useful to have? How do I create opportunities? And doing that in a way that feels okay with you, not necessarily going to the scariest, biggest event, but what's the small, easy places I could start? Who could I go with? Who could be my buddy? And we're going to have play a little game with it, treat it lightly, and go out there and just engage and see what happens. Our experience is the more people give this a go, the less intimidating it feels, the less difficult it is. And so being willing to give it a go is really important.
Yeah, I think what we're wanting to do is create opportunity, right? Start conversations. Not every conversation or person you meet will translate into a deep relationship, but that is the starting point. So the more that we do that, it is more likely that we will meet more people if we're thinking about sort of connecting outside our organization, but even equally starting conversations in lifts, in kitchens, finding out about who people are, what they do. That is the spark or the potential opportunity to be able to build a deeper relationship that can be supportive. Um, Being once you've done that, it's really about taking the connection into a conversation and then ultimately into a relationship in some form. I think being really intentional here is critical. Some people naturally do this, and many of us would naturally invest time and energy in creating conversations, connections, relationships with people who are more like-minded, unless prioritized in doing that with people maybe who we don't resonate with. But it is really useful to be more intentional about building those relationships and where you would prioritize investing the time, because it does take some time. But I'm going to suggest it doesn't take as long or as much as we often believe it does, which is why being intentional matters, because that can help us identify whether we're looking to build a deep, long-term relationship, or it's actually we're just looking for, someone who we know of, who we're familiar with, but we have kind of what we would say a weak tie connection to.
I think the next piece we want to focus in on is to get clear on what you want, the outcome you desire, who it is that influences your career. Influence mapping is a really cool tool to do here. So you can start to map out, see the landscape of where you are and who might be useful and influential as you think about the ways in which others can influence and support your career. And there's a whole lot of people who useful in this context. Many women we see over rely on their line leader. Yes, your line leader potentially will find opportunities for you, will look for ways in which you can maybe be seconded or be part of a project or that sort of thing. But we don't want to over rely on that. We want to think about other ways in which there are people who we can engage with. And one of the big ones, and this is certainly something that the data supports, is that women are way under-sponsored compared to men. In fact, the latest McKinsey report that came out really talked about the ways in which women tend to not have those senior executives, those relationships with senior stakeholders. And those people very often are in the rooms where the conversations are being had. They're the ones who can say, hey, I saw Belinda, we were working on this project, she did X and Y, and that means we should consider her for this new opportunity. So thinking about who are the people who could be sponsors, both internally to your organization and beyond, is a really good place to start.
Yeah, sponsor will advocate for you. They will find opportunities for you. Distinct though from mentors. And again, one of the very common lines is under-sponsored, over-mentored. But essentially, mentors are there as independent, often more senior, although reverse mentoring has become really popular of late, which is where someone more senior is partnered with someone more junior or with less experience, to be able to partner, collaborate, bounce ideas off each other, get help. But mentoring is a really popular, and we're going to say important, resource. We facilitate lots of in-house mentoring programs. We've been involved in lots of industry mentor programs. And time again, the value that both mentees and mentors get from those relationships is significant in so many different ways. And so being really proactive around building both, I'm going to suggest formal and informal mentor relationships. It's something that I've done throughout my entire career. I've coached and supported clients to go and do this. And it is such a source of incredible support. It can be an incredible accelerator for career, and it also can be a great way to build even further networks and influence across an organization, especially the big organizations where maybe it's impossible to know who everyone is and what roles they do and etc.
Yeah, I think the other place that can be really useful is thinking about peers and collaborators, people in your world that maybe are a similar level to you, both within the organization and beyond. They may be able to support you from a subject matter expertise. They can enhance your skills. You can have good conversations with them about trends, about things you're observing. They can be great emotional support. It's not always going to be easy. And so having those like-minded people who you can rely on in those moments where you feel challenged is really, really useful. And they can also be really rich sounding boards. They're also navigating career challenges. They're also in the mix. And so when you're struggling with something, it's quite likely they've come across it before, they've known someone who has. And so you can draw on that well of experience and be able to think about how you might want to go about something that feels a bit challenging. And sitting quite close to that is the value of what we call the weak tie. And weak ties are people who maybe you met or knew a few years ago, maybe you worked with them a few years ago, maybe you know through a colleague or you've been introduced to, or maybe you just like something they shared on LinkedIn and you made a connection there. You don't know them well. That's the definition of a weak tie. However, very often they're the ones that lead to quite big opportunities. And it's almost like that little bit of connection you have, that little bit of interaction has given them enough confidence and that they know enough that they're willing to say, hey, I think you should speak to Sally about this, or I think you should include this person. So don't underestimate those people you don't know that well, because they can be really beneficial too.
Um, to put this in a really, I guess, simple plan on how to go about this, we talk about 5 steps. Who needs to know about you? Why? Right? Why do they need to know? What outcome are you trying to achieve? What do they need to know about you? How are you going to go about building this relationship with them? And what could get in the way? And so to share this kind of an example of a client who I was working with, her outcome, what she was wanting to achieve, was to get a seat on her board. She was a finance executive, and she wanted to grow her career, but equally get some board experience. And so the person who she needed to build brand and profile with was actually a consultant who worked with the organization at a board level and at an organizational level. She needed that consultant to know that she was a safe pair of hands, that she had great attention to detail and was a subject matter expert in the regulatory environment with which they operated. And the how to go about it was actually initially starting to have a coffee, but actually to work on a project together. Working alongside each other or with someone is a really great way for that person to be able to get firsthand evidence and experience, not just of what your skill, capability, experience is, but also your interpersonal traits and characteristics as well, which can be really important and valuable for building trust and credibility. And so, that who's the person I want to focus on, important because if we just think about building relationships, it can become overwhelming. Whereas when we're intentional, when we're clear about who, the outcome we're seeking to achieve, what they need to know about us, and how we're going to go about doing that, then we are likely going to be able to do it a whole lot more efficiently and effectively. The fifth thing there is around what are the roadblocks? What could stop me? What could stop me from reaching out and actually taking action on this plan? And that's a really important one to dig into. You might want to, we've talked about this already, but sometimes, when we think about building relationships, we don't want to owe someone something. And so the more that we can start to think ahead and be proactive around where might I feel uncomfortable, where might I, even with a plan, when I think about taking action on my plan, where might something get in my way, the more that I'm aware of these roadblocks, and that is a big part of the work that we do, the more that you can resource yourself with strategies to be able to navigate through those roadblocks, knowing it's going to be uncomfortable and taking action anyway, so that we can actually start to take action, implement, and then benefit from the relationships that we're seeking to create.
And in service of all of this, we're always going to encourage you to take small, consistent actions rather than the very big thing. That's why breaking it down into a plan and steps, it means I've got step by step the things that I need to do, and I can take an action towards them. This will not always feel comfortable. We're really going to say there's a piece here about getting over the discomfort or being willing to lean in and give it a go anyway. Be kind to yourself, be gentle as you do it, and it's so worth having the conversation, following up, making sure you're contributing, making sure you're interacting, making sure you continue to engage with these people you've met. It can be simple. It can be, we met up for a coffee. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'd love to see you again in a couple of months. Kate was an absolute master at this when we first met, and we were introduced by some mutual colleagues and actually my husband originally. And so we got together, but she was the one who said, hey, let's pop a date in the diary. Let's have another lunch. Let's keep this going. And, it can lead to all sorts of things, including us working together. So I think the opportunity here is to really be consciously thinking about the relationships you want to curate, not trying to do it all in one big fell swoop, and taking those small steps towards it and building those connections over time.
We're going to leave it there. If you've enjoyed today's confidence conversation, we'd love to hear from you, your comments. If you know someone who would benefit, please go ahead and share this video with them. If you want to tune into more in this video series, head over to our YouTube channel, hundreds of videos, including the others in this series, over on our YouTube channel. And if and when you're ready to go deeper with your relationship with core confidence, visit our website, coreconfidence.com.au. Thanks for tuning in today. Don't forget to hit subscribe on your YouTube channel for more insights on confidence, leadership, and complex work environments. We drop new videos regularly, and we'd love to share them with you.